I used to consider myself a leftist. I used to consider myself a socialist. I used to consider myself a libertarian socialist. 20 years ago, I thought I was an anarchist. And it was actually an interesting lesson in self-understanding when I discovered this philosophy of anarchism and then discovered how it had been known and talked about and debated and been a cultural influence long, long ago, like the 1910s. Which meant that it wasn't a revolutionary new idea that had the power, the potential to change the world in my lifetime. It wasn't something that I could hope to join with the expectation that I would be able to change the world by joining this. And that took some wind out of my sails. And that was good because I had to do some growing up. I had to realize that the world is bigger and deeper and wider than my perception of it. And so my idealistic feelings and my emotional response to what I see and how I interpret events is only one small perspective and is not the objective understanding of the reality of how everything goes. It's embarrassing for me to admit this. However, I reflect that probably a lot of people haven't learned this basic life lesson yet. This just really, again, basic principle of individual growth that you ought to set in order before you presume to give your voice to or put your shoulder to the wheel of any particular political enterprise. It occurs to me that political philosophies should be like scientific theories. Human beings being what they are, even scientific theories, I think, might not... A scientific theory in its purity is something that exists in kind of this mental abstract, but it is something that people make, and the people that make scientific theories, being human beings, and especially likely being unrepentant human beings, might be guilty of treating them very unscientifically and treating them more as the tribal standard than anything else. So it is with political theories. Both of them ought to be open to and even solicitous to correction by new information, and people should be ready to, modify or abandon them as new information comes to light, man. So, I derail myself with my little inside jokes. If you got that one, tell me in the comments. If you didn't get it, tell me in the comments. Where was I? So, yeah, trimming our political philosophy based on new information. It's basically what I've done. I used to consider myself a leftist, even a socialist, and I went through a process of repentance where I realized I was being silly, and I left that behind. I used to be active on a forum. It was a Yahoo group. I don't know if anybody remembers Yahoo groups. They were pretty big. At least I took part in many of them. Right at the turn of the century, there was one called LDS Left. It wasn't Choose the Left. I think that might have been like a slogan that they had. But it was LDS Left, I think. And there's people who were members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints who also thought leftward politically. And it was, those sorts of things tend to shake out into the usual gang of idiots, the usual suspects, the usual regular contributors, and correspondences, conversations by correspondence tend to sort of fall into ruts. This is how we are. I was active on several Yahoo groups, actually. There was some for the INFP personality group. Oh boy, that was a story. Have I talked about this on here before? I don't remember if I've talked about this on here before. It split. There's this, actually it was the INFP 20-somethings, because I was in my 20s at the time. And there was this guy that was the moderator, and he was an absolute tyrant. So a bunch of us jumped ship and went and started another one. And the drama, oh dear Lord, the drama. I guess crash outs would be the term now. Just rants, and metaphorically speaking, because none of this was auditory, this was all based on text. But capital letters galore. So on the LDS Left Yahoo group, there was one, there were people who would predictably always, there'd be the debates, and there was one guy who was like, people kept asking, why are you here? Because he was always poking holes and advocating, right-wing ideas, just a terrible person. I appreciate what he did. I appreciate him not just letting it be an echo chamber. Maybe that's all people really want, is an echo chamber. But he wouldn't let it be an echo chamber. He was always poking at it, and he was always getting responses. There was just this predictable pattern of people just invoking scriptures that talked about concern for the poor and how wrong economic equality is, and using that as like a QED, as if it's just sort of proves our leftist or socialist position. When I first read Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, I was such a sucker. I was so open-hearted and easy to be entreated and vulnerable. I would let myself get suckered in with anything that could get my heart rate up, anything that could rouse my emotions a certain way. I was just such easy prey for this kind of emotional manipulation that's so common. So yeah, I remember reading The Jungle for the first time, and it's 1905 Chicago, which is I think when Emma Goldman was active there before she got kicked out. But I'm not sure how. That's a nice pickup truck. I'm not sure how much Sinclair was really advocating anarchism. I think he was more of a socialist. I mean, the whole book is kind of socialist propaganda, really. I mean, not that the terrible things didn't really happen that it describes. I mean, it's horrific to read about the workers' conditions. Immigrant Lithuanian, some kind of Baltic immigrants. This protagonist is a Baltic immigrant in Chicago, and how he goes from one job to another, and it's just crushing everybody, and it's horrifying. And so there's this one scene where he's at a socialist meeting, and the speaker just gets people riled up and wants to get people to join, and the protagonist wants to become a socialist. And then the rest of the book, actually the book ends with like a speech, saying Chicago will be ours. And I remember reading it and thinking, oh my gosh, this is so persuasive and eloquent. How could anybody not be swayed by this, by reading such eloquent, powerful persuasion? And I went back and read it a second time, and I looked for the part in the socialist speech that really convinced me when I read it, and I thought, what? That's what convinced me? He's not making any arguments. He's not making any detailed, principled arguments. He's just whipping up people's feelings and stepping in and saying, offering this sort of short circuit. You feel this way, and here I am with, this is the solution. Because you feel this way, you join me and follow me, and this will make it better. And people get so animated and agitated in their feelings that it really does turn their reasoning off. And then people will dedicate themselves to this position that they adopted in this frenzy of affectation, of affect, of emotion, and they'll live in this affective reality, and they'll defend it. Sometimes they'll defend it to the death. It is a sad and scary part of human nature. There was an online publication called The Mormon Worker. Back when I was most ardent in thinking that I was an anarchist, I encountered this. I thought, oh my gosh, there's other people that think like me. I think that, Mormons ought to be anarchists because that's scriptural. I actually started going through the whole Book of Mormon. I started going through, from the beginning, chapter by chapter, and writing in a notebook, all the things that I found that were backing up why I thought that that the Book of Mormon supported, my leftist political ideas, and particularly more, socialist. And if you'd ask me to define exactly what socialism was, actually, when I read The Jungle, there's a point where somebody puts two defining tenets of socialism. If I remember right, the first is that the means of production should be democratically controlled. And I thought, I like that. I like that very much. And I still think that I still like the idea, the principle of cooperative enterprise. But you know what? My idealistic self that doesn't like to get my hands dirty with things that happen in the real world was not doing my homework and understanding and seeing that there are a lot of cooperative enterprises already going on. It's been going on for a long time. So it's not like some kind of, oh my gosh, look at me, I found this idea. Listen to me, everybody. We should cooperate. Yeah, say all kinds of farmers and whatever else. Yeah, we've got our co-op. It's it's all in a day's work for us. That's just what we do. So what? Okay, so the world is complex, and there's things that people have thought of that I haven't thought of, and I'm still young and inexperienced, and there's still a lot that I don't know. So am I going to just continue to shout, everybody pay attention to my feelings, and I'm so hurt that, there are poor people, and if you just go along with my feelings, then we can make it happen that there aren't going to be any more poor people. Where was I? Yes, the two principles of socialism as Sinclair's character. The second tenet of socialism, according to this character in The Jungle, and so presumably according to Sinclair himself, is big old freaking truck here. Is that this democratic control of the means of production is to be achieved by class struggle, and that's where I put the brakes on. I thought, whoa, what? No, sorry. You've lost me. And I thought, well, okay, I could go along with socialism if you just take away the class struggle part. Can I do that? Can I say I'm a socialist and I don't really believe in class struggle? I think there's got to be other ways. Actually, I think that was a big part of my self-professed anarchism, as I thought. I thought that I could have, I believe in the cooperation and the sharing and the decentralization and the small scale and so on and so on. And I still do believe that that's on the whole a sound principle, and that there's some cases where mass efficiency or mass scale doesn't lead to the better good, like efficiency. Anyway, I'm getting off topic here. I'm trying to say that there are things that I still think are a good idea or work well, that I believed back when I considered myself leftist socialist, but I don't hold that political philosophy or identification anymore. Actually, there was this web-based movement thing of people that considered themselves part of the libertarian left, And boy, you want to talk about infighting? It was. I'm sorry that I didn't watch The Life of Brian earlier, because it was classic Life of Brian. It was classic People's Front of Judea, or Judean People's Front, or whatever, all the little splinter groups. There's like that scene where Brian is talking to the People's Front of Judea, because they're not the Judean People's Front, those, wankers, and there's like, whatever happened to the whatever group, and there's one guy sitting over there on the other end of the Colosseum. Splitter! That was 1979. And what I found when I was thinking I was a libertarian socialist was exactly that. People were forever squabbling and splintering because of these little disagreements about these little minutiae of their theory. And meanwhile, there have been some people who are just kind of plugging away and trying to do, really unconventional, virtuous things like build open source machines and figure out how to build machines and houses and things kind of without a lot of money, without a lot of capital, but with know-how and cooperation. And those were the guys that weren't calling themselves anything. They were just getting on with how to do this kind of stuff. Getting in and just putting in the daily work of getting your hands dirty, and never mind all this theorizing. So a lot of hard work, and who wants to do that if I'm in my feelings about how I wish I had more. It's not really I think it's neutral as to whether I'm not sure if being in my feelings, wishing sad that I don't have more. I'm not sure if it's exactly opposed to or detrimental to doing a lot of work and a lot of hard work, but it certainly isn't conducive to doing a lot of hard work. The Mormon Worker, this publication I found. I thought, I found my tribe. I found my tribe, the people that think like me, And as I started to, I'm going to try to keep this short. I'm going to have to cut this short. As I started to open my eyes, or I started to realize, I couldn't in good conscience hold myself too much to a lot of these feelings I had without really taking into account the practical applications, or what about, have you considered, because I get on other forums, and I passionately advocate for what I felt, like some of these people did on LDS Left, and some of the people, I'm grateful, just weren't having my mooncalf ways. They were going to call me out and point out ways that I was just being naive. And I'm grateful to that, even though my feelings were hurt at the time. I was very, very, very stung and very upset by how people were calling me out for being really naive. And I'm grateful that they did that. Whoever you are out there, thank you for bursting my bubble, for bursting my idealistic bubbles and making me think, and making me face up to how I just couldn't keep certain positions. And I started to think, it's kind of like the adage of people that wear a hammer and a sickle have never wielded either. And I thought, people call themselves this. I was trying to break into this Mormon Worker media scene, publication or whatever, and be one of them, be accepted into their group because I believed the same, and maybe I could contribute somehow and whatever. And I realized, wait a minute, I don't think these people are actually workers. I don't think these guys are working in construction or getting up on, cherry pickers to fix electric lines. I don't think they're working on oil rigs. I don't think they're working in foundries. I don't think they're installing HVAC units. I don't think that they're on landscape crews. I don't think that they're doing really hard manual work. I don't think that this is actually a case of people who are really workers for workers. I think this is probably sheltered Utah Wasatch Front, let's say, mostly sheltered Wasatch Front, white collar professionals who are accustomed to a certain standard of living and are in this self-righteousness. The same old story of leftist movements in the United States. Last time I went and looked in and saw to see if the Mormon worker was still a thing, I think it was on a Facebook page that I found. And I've been off Facebook for years. And what did I see? I saw a disparaging joke about Joseph Smith, and I thought, yep, not surprised. Not surprised at all. If you think that you're going to try to reconcile, faithful membership in the church with a really fervent advocacy of a radical leftist political position, those roads are going to diverge. And yeah, it would apply to a really radical right-wing political position as well. If you're going to try to hold membership in the church with a really fervent devotion to some political cause, especially some, really, I guess, yeah, radical or extreme political cause, those roads are going to diverge, and you're going to have to find yourself facing the question of which master you're going to serve. And it's going to test your mettle, and it's going to test your priorities of what spell you're really going to take as the best. Which spell is really good to you, is the good spell to you. Which message are you going to heed? Which program are you going to follow? You're going to have to make a choice. So I've made my choice, and it's not leftism. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you later.